on mute so that it just cuts out some of the outside noise as well. We do have a number of staff joining us today, as well as 2 board members. We have Pam Costa and Dr. Mike McKibben, and I don't know if Mike is on yet, but at some point they will be joining. Our agenda today is going to cover 2 main items. Melissa Bassinelli, our Deputy Superintendent, is going to go over some information related to distance learning and really share you're going to get a preview of what the board is going to see just on a smaller version next Tuesday. And then I'm going to go over some information related to the budget and the impacts that we're going to see. Also kind of a preview that the board is going to be seeing next Tuesday. And then we'll have an opportunity for some open forum or questions or comments. I'm going to turn it over to Trent real quick, and he's going to give some overview of how to make sure we're participating, and I'll turn it over to Trent.
Hi, everybody. So today, just to make sure we run smoothly, because we do have quite a few folks on the call, we are going to keep people muted while the presentations are going on. And when we get to the end of presentations, we'll of course have time for questions and answers and some conversation. If during that time you want to ask a question and participate, we're going to ask you to raise your hand. And you can do that one of 2 ways. If you're on that mobile device, down at the bottom of your screen, there should just be that little raise hand icon. You can just tap that. That will indicate to us that you'd like to say something, and we'll go ahead and make sure you can be unmuted and share. If you are on a desktop device, so a web browser or the desktop Zoom application, at the bottom of the participants list is the raise hand button. Sometimes you will have to click a little participants button in your black toolbar to get this participants list to show. But at the bottom of the participants list is the raise hand button. And again, when we get to the end of a presentation, we're there for conversations. If you'd like to say something, go ahead and just raise your hand to make sure we don't miss you. And we'll make sure that everybody gets a chance to have some conversation as well. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it back over to Kent.
All right, thanks, Trent. Okay, at this time, and again, welcome, and I do see Dr. McKibben has joined us as well, so I appreciate having 2 board members here. I think we have 4 or 5 cabinet members participating in the event as well. I am going to turn it over to Melissa Bassinelli. She is going to share her screen so that you can see the slides nice and big, and go ahead and take it away, Melissa.
Okay, everyone can see my screen?
Yep.
All right, great. Yes. So I'm excited to share with you a summary of the work that's occurred since we had to close our schools back into March. And so this update is very broad in nature. I'll also be sharing with you some preliminary data that we have been able to pull together from the parent survey that closed last week, and then just give you a little bit of a taste of the conversations and the planning that we have for next school year. But before I go on, I want to just recognize there was so much work to be done over the past 2 months and some weeks since closure that we have had such a variety of personnel and departments that have really contributed to the work that I am going to share with you today. And I just wanted to recognize them because their work has been phenomenal, and this is a culmination of a team effort among our personnel, our departments, our labor groups, our families and community. So when the COVID-19 pandemic was quickly escalating, our district, as well as others through the state, we were forced with the realization that school closure was inevitable. At the point of closure, we were confronted with the reality that none of us had experienced, and we were challenged to blaze a new path for learning. Along this distance learning journey, we've had to be quick, nimble, and flexible as the COVID-19 pandemic has been ever evolving and rapidly changes, with information at times changing daily and sometimes even hourly. As we navigated this road less traveled at times, not really traveled at all, we identified the following goals to serve as guideposts to anchor us along the way. And so first and foremost, a priority has been to support the health and safety of our staff, students, and our community. In addition to that, we have a goal of successfully graduating every eligible senior by June 2020. Also, we desire to engage our students in learning and mastery of standards through distance learning and our continued support of nutrition disbursement. In terms of distance learning, we provided over 21,000 technology devices to students since March 26th, and we've worked with families to resolve gaps in internet connectivity. Additionally, our professional learning and innovation team quickly organized distance learning resources into an online teacher hub, which has generated over 22,000 internet visits. Our teachers continue to work remotely, providing real-time lessons using platforms such as Zoom and Seesaw, and are also using platforms such as Google Classroom to follow up with student work. You might also have found your teachers using less techy platforms such as email and phone calls, good old-fashioned phone calls. In terms of nutrition, we've provided safe curbside service at 27 of our sites. And for service, we've equipped our staff with training around safety and procedures, as well as with personal protective equipment. We also provided translation support for our families during the pickup time so that families understand the process, they know the food that they're receiving, and they also know how to keep the food items safe from spoilage. So between March 17th, when we first started, and this report today, we've served over 300,000 meals. Social workers, mental health therapists, nurses, and counselors have also continued their outreach and support of families who are receiving services pre-COVID. In addition, they've had many new referrals and have been doing a lot of outreach since our COVID closures. To help keep our parents informed, we launched the COVID-19 microsite, which is connected to our district's website, to provide our parents and community with the most up-to-date information regarding the changes of instructional program as a result of closure. By May 21st, there have been over 70,000 visits to this microsite. In addition to the COVID-19 microsite, we also created a parent resource hub that was led by our FACE department, and that's Families and Community Engagement, to make accessible the diverse resources offered through our district, as well as regional agencies and community partners. The Parent Hub has had more than 150 online participants in virtual training and 750 views of training videos. And we have parent ambassadors that are also have initiated more than 300 direct support contacts with parents. And lastly, our central enrollment team, they modified their procedures to allow for online enrollment, transfer requests, and records requests. And so since March 16th, with this shift to online processes, we received close to 800 inquiries around enrollment or transfers. In addition to the district-wide program changes to reduce the impact of school closures on students and families, targeted approaches were put into place to meet the needs of our English learners, foster youth, and low-income students. As you may be aware, the multi-tiered system of support team operates support centers for school sites where 40% or more of the students are socioeconomically disadvantaged. In preparation for school closures and the transition to distance learning, this team adapted their service model to ensure ongoing support for our low-income students at risk of being most impacted by the closures. Academic intervention specialists have supported outreach efforts and have made contacts with students who are not accessing distance learning. They're also providing computer-based academic intervention programs such as iReady and Lexia. Social workers and counselors continue to provide outreach and support for currently assigned students and also newly referred students through our district referral process. Our mental health therapists are providing telehealth services upon request through also the district referral process. And our school nurses are serving as an additional layer of support to school sites, scheduling emergency dental appointments during the shelter-in-place order and organizing plans to offer dental screening, eye examination, and free glasses at student support centers in the fall 2020. To date, our district has been in contact with 99% of our low-income students and families throughout the closure, and we've checked out 69 percent of our low-income students have received a Chromebook through our Chromebook deployment. The Office of Student Learning Assistance staff, they've been translating district communications to ensure language barriers do not prevent English language learner students and families from accessing critical information about school closures, food and computer distribution, distance learning, training, and other resources. Additionally, bilingual instructional assistants and school community resource assistants have been in direct outreach to families in their home language, providing training and support to ensure students and families are able to access and use the virtual platforms to communicate and conduct distance learning. As with our low socioeconomic status learners, also our English learners, we've been in contact with 99% of our English learners, students, and families. And of that population, 80% have had Chromebooks checked out to them. Our foster youth services team maintained their operations and continued to provide support to foster youth and families through school closures and distance learning, and we've also maintained contact with 99% of our foster youth students. San Juan Unified School District has been thoughtful about how instruction and support services were rolled out to address questions of equity and meet legal requirements under federal and state law related to equal access for our diverse learners. It's our intent that every senior who meets eligibility requirements graduates this June, and that all of our students can engage in meaningful learning. We continue to work with our labor partners, families, and site practitioners to deliver high quality learning through new learning platforms while also meeting the needs of our diverse learners. In this effort, we've had teams of preschool through 12th grade teachers, including special education representatives, teachers on special assignment, English language development specialists, administrators, and early childhood education staff who have been working to design and phase in a professional learning support process for teachers. As I previously mentioned, staff developed and they continue to curate the Distance Learning Hub. This Distance Learning Hub for teachers, it includes training calendars, grade level, Google Classroom collaboration spaces, technology training videos, lots of drop-in support, and curriculum training videos. We also have additional resources on there for supports around special education services, English language development, physical education, and visual and performing arts. In total, our teachers and other certificated staff, we've had over 3,500 training sessions, and the 23 technology training videos have had 4,800 views. When we shifted to a distance learning model, new grading guidelines were established for students K through 12. This included a credit, no credit default system in secondary, default grading system, and growth marks in elementary. Additionally, students in grades 9 through 12 also have an option to opt out of the credit, no credit default grading model and request a letter grade. Since distance learning has begun, data has been collected to determine students who are not connected to distance learning. And as I said, we have been in contact with 99% of our students and families. For the 1% that we have not, we have been engaging in safety nets, which is very targeted outreach by a variety of staff, and it's aimed at making sure that we are reaching each and every student and engaging them in learning. With less than 1 week left in our school year, we've continued to focus on the implementation of our distance learning model and grading guidelines. This week, we're implementing virtual high school graduation so that current health guidelines and social distancing restrictions can be maintained and in place. It's our hope that these celebrations represent a culmination of the hard work of our seniors, and it marks a transition to their post-secondary education and careers. Last week, we wrapped up our family survey, which is being used as a tool to gather feedback regarding current distance learning efforts and collect interest in models for the 2020-21 school year. Overall, we had nearly 9,000 responses to the survey. You can see here that all schools were represented, but we did have quite a degree of variability when you look at the count by school, meaning one school had 32 responses and up through a school with as high as 732 responses. All of our grade levels were represented. However, the most consistent grade levels that are represented in this survey are grades K, kindergarten through 11th grade. In terms of density levels, and just a reminder, this is an unduplicated count of low socioeconomic status students, English language learners, and foster youth. We had the majority of the responses were from low density schools. Languages, predominantly we had the respondents reported that English was their first language. And then you can see that the grade spans were evenly distributed. In terms of the question of how satisfied are you with distance learning, overall 47% of respondents said that they were very or moderately satisfied, while 27% of respondents said that they were not satisfied. We had greater levels of satisfaction at our high density schools, which you can see here that there's a total of 50% reported that they were very to moderately satisfied. And then looking at grade spans, we had greater satisfaction. We see greater satisfaction with 52% reporting that they're very to moderately satisfied in grades TK through second. And you can see satisfaction decreasing as grade levels get higher. In looking at the question that asks parents, what are the ways you are supporting your students' learning at home? And a parent could respond, could check any that applied. We saw the highest response rate. Number one was 88% reported that they encouraged their student. Coming in second is about an even share, and so that's with 76% saying that they've talked to their student about how they're feeling, and I'm sorry, 76% says that they talk about how the learning's going with their student, and 75% ask how they are feeling. And then 71% work to help their student understand specific assignments. There was an other option for this question, and so what we saw trending was that in the other category and looking at the responses, many reported that they were monitoring and trying to engage their students, meaning they were trying to keep their student on track, keep their, help them keep a calendar, monitor their work, making sure they're being honest on their responses. In terms of challenges, we didn't see any differences by density level, but what we did see consistent is that a primary challenge, it seems to be that assignments are unclear. And you can see here in looking at the grade levels, it does trend higher for secondary rather than elementary. And then you can also see trending is too much work assigned. It's pretty consistent across grade levels, but the average is second highest in the category of challenges. In looking at the preferred model for next year, 52 to 58% across the grade level bands prefer to be in a traditional, reported that they prefer to be in a traditional model in the fall. And you can see that this trends down as students get older. So you can see 58% in TK grades 2 reported that, and we're down to 52% in grades 9 through 12. You can also see that 27% to 35% prefer to be in a hybrid model in the fall. And you see that that response rate trends up as students get older. So we started with 27% in TK grades 2, and it ends with 35% in grades 9 through 12. There are similarities across density. And that bottom shaded box, We saw that 19% of respondents reported that childcare impacts their choice in terms of traditional, hybrid, or distance learning model. And we see greater impacts for reported for high density schools, coming from high density schools and lower grades.
Melissa,
Yeah.
you want to take a second, or you want to explain now or go into more detail when we talk about hybrid? I'm not sure everybody really understands what the hybrid.
Yeah, that's just 2 more slides up. A hybrid model, so the example that was on the parent survey, and if for those of you who took it, what was given as an example for that hybrid model was 2 days of in-person learning at a school site with 3 days potentially of distance learning back at home. And so these could potentially be smaller cohorts of students, but it would be 2 days at a school site, 3 days home. And then not on this slide, but I wanted to share with you, we did see that 7% of the respondents did report that at this time they were experiencing food limitations. And the same rate of 7% also expressed housing concerns. So this kind of leads into the planning for 2020-21. And so in this planning process, we've really identified 6 strategic priorities. And our first priority is overarching, and it impacts everything that we do in terms of our planning. And that has to do with the health and safety of our students, families, and staff and community. And as you know, we receive health orders from the county, and as this is an entirely fluid situation that we're all living in, these orders have the capacity of changing quickly and rapidly, which makes planning challenging. But it is our interest to maintain the safety of our school communities, and so that is what we're leading with first and foremost. The other 2, there are 2 other priorities that share equal importance because they really work hand in hand together. And that has to do with focused instruction, as well as community building and relationships. During this time more than ever, where we're all experiencing varying degrees of social isolation through this shelter-in-place order, it's more important now that we reach out to each other and build those meaningful relationships and connections, because that's how our students come ready to learn, is when we have those strong foundational school-to-home relationships. And so that is really the foundation. It's something that we pride ourselves in San Juan as having prioritized all along the way, valuing relationships. And that's going to be one of our leading charges as we reopen schools back in the fall. In addition to that is focused instruction. We are working to really focus our efforts around essential standards. What are those building block standards that our students need to master in order to be successful in the grade level, as well as across content and as they move to the next grade levels. And we're working to identify and develop courses or resources and curriculum over the summer that help prepare our teachers to be ready to teach in a focused way, utilizing our essential standards guidelines. Additionally, our interest is to support the whole child, and this ranges from supports related to English language learners, foster youth, students with disabilities, to ensuring nutrition access continues, as well as technology access continues. Another huge priority for us is to support our parents and to build self-efficacy, meaning building capacity. This has not been an easy road for so many of us. It was a real spontaneous release of responsibility into this new endeavor of distance learning. And we're partners in education together. And so we really have a strong interest to be deliberate and targeted in how we support our families in supporting learning at home. While we know that we will have to be ready to respond to whatever the public health orders are at the time and implement programs. And then the last piece is really maintaining transparent and timely communication. We have, through this experience, we have had to send out probably more communication centrally maybe than most other years. And information changes rapidly in terms of our planning process, but it is our intention to be as transparent and timely as we can in our communications so that families feel equipped and knowledgeable in terms of their own planning process and preparing. So for next year, what we are looking at is we're really looking at a continuum of learning options. And that is, I want to again emphasize that this is all going to follow federal, state, and county health guidelines. So the models that we implement are going to be influenced by whatever our county health guidelines are at that time. So in preparation for that, we know that we need to build multiple models for implementation so that we can move along this continuum and be quick and flexible as the pandemic continues to move through our area. And so with this, we are looking at a continuum that includes a full distance learning model if necessary, if we were to get the same stay-at-home order that we had back in March. Which is what the model that you've been experiencing in terms of 5 days of distance learning. That includes asynchronous and synchronous learning. And the synchronous learning is really the real in-time learning where you're seeing the teacher on the video in a video chat with your child through Zoom. Or synchronous learning can be a telephone call as well. The asynchronous is where you see on like Google Classroom, where you might see lessons that are posted or emails that are sent with assignments. Those are things that are done on a student's own time. And so we know that this model, going back to the data, our families prefer to not be in this model. So given the evolution of the stay-at-home orders and the guidelines from the county, we are anticipating that we might need to be looking at a hybrid model, which would involve 2 days of in-person learning at a school site with 3 days of distance learning. We know that we'll have to implement social distancing practices, which would potentially reduce class sizes and modified schedules. And then also while planning for the potential of having the order lifted and being able to go into a full traditional model, which is 5 days in person. Following along the entire continuum, we have an interest and an intention to bolster our homeschool model in grades K through 8, as well as our independent study model in grades 9 through 12. We have existing programs there, so we're looking at building those partnership academies, which we call them partnership academies because it's a school-home partnership, so that parents have choice in terms of program. So if we open up, say, in a hybrid model in the fall, and families don't feel comfortable attending a school at all, they have an option to enroll in a partnership, the partnership academies, so that they can still engage in learning and have that choice and flexibility. So our next steps is that we continue to meet in a variety of work groups to plan for next school year. We're digging in more into the feedback that I shared with you, some of initial data points that we saw. We are recruiting and identifying our teachers, our practitioners, to assist with the development of distance learning lessons over the summer that are aligned to specific standards. And then we're still continuing to plan for professional learning, and we are also preparing our facilities. And there's probably about 30 more bullets that I could add to this list, but I think you get the gist in terms of the planning process. And I'm going to turn it back to Superintendent Kern because we would like to open it up for further discussion and questions.
All right, thank you, Melissa. You know, and I want to share with the group what we know, and as we have tried to listen to the community members or folks, is that a one-size-fits-all model in this fall will not work. I spent quite a bit of time last night reading comments on the Facebook page of KCRA after they presented the piece about the county's document that came out yesterday. And you would see one person that would say, if a district requires students to wear masks, I'm going to homeschool my kid. And then right below it, it would say, if the district doesn't require my students to wear masks, I'm going to keep my kids home. So it's one of those situations where it really can be very personal. We have a lot of folks who even want, you saw the largest percentage would like us to get back to kind of regular 5-day a week as soon as possible. Well, right now, based on the guidelines from both the county and the state, we're unable to do that. But again, we have no idea what will change between now and the start of the school year. I shared with all of our principals on Friday, we've been closed for 2 months and 2 weeks. We had on Friday about 2 months and 3 weeks till school starts. Think about how much has changed in the first 10 weeks and what could change in the next 11 weeks. And we have to be able to be flexible and nimble for that. But in fact, one of the comments I read last night is, I wish the schools aren't listening. I want to tell people we are trying to listen. And that's why we know that even in this group of people that are here today, what you hope or what you would allow your students to be exposed to in the fall will look very different person from person. So we have been working very hard in partnership with our Teachers Association to be able to address those issues. And I will share with you, much like you guys want answers, I wish, we want answers, and we wish we had more information, because the hardest thing is to not have all the information we need to make decisions for even August. But we're trying to be prepared for every situation that we can be. Melissa didn't go into a tremendous amount of detail, but one of the things I want to share, well, she went into a lot of detail, a lot of stuff, but on one item I kind of want to speak to. We know that, and I've heard this from my student group that I met with, we know this from parent feedback, that the level of instruction that has happened during this time is not consistent, and it can look dramatically different. If you have multiple kids in your home and they're all in elementary school, you may see that, or even teacher by teacher at the high school level. One of the things that we've been working with our Teachers Association on is identifying some of our strongest teachers at every single grade, K-12, and even by subject matter, and having those folks over the course of the summer develop lessons, have those lessons recorded, so that if we are in a hybrid model or certain models in the fall, all students would be getting the same level of consistent instruction. We actually think, that's going to be really powerful to have strong teachers presenting that work. I think it's a model that, as I've shared with other districts, has the potential for them to either mimic or even want to utilize some of what we're going to develop this summer. Because I think that lack of consistency is troubling. It's troubling for us, but the level of expertise that staff have to be able to support and provide is very different, and the level of even concern and worry that our staff is going through. So I just wanted to share a little bit with that. And at this time, we'd like to take a little bit of time to ask questions. So if you go ahead and use that raise hand feature, what we'll do is Trent will help unmute you. Trent and Nan will unmute. If you can just, again, what would be great is if you can share your name as well in the school that you represent, and then go ahead and ask the question, and myself and Melissa, our other staff, will do the best we can to answer those questions. So Trent, at this time, if you can jump in here as well.
So again, if you want to raise your hand on a mobile device, down at the bottom of your screen is that icon. If you're on a desktop, at the bottom of that participants list. And we're going to go ahead and get started with Susan Bassett. And Susan, you should be unmuted.
Hi, Trent. Thank you. Just looking for a little clarification. I have one child in K-8. She's in 3rd grade. And I had one child in a middle school, and they had very different experiences. My middle schooler received instruction almost from the first day home. And felt like he didn't miss a beat. His teachers were engaged and just kept on going. It was exciting to see how they kept the students engaged and moving. They'd been using Google Classroom, and so there was familiarity, and they did really well. And I felt like he thrived through this, which was exciting for a middle schooler. My third graders are tough. Third grade girl was a very different story. And I felt like I was getting different information from different places, that elementary teachers were told not to teach, that it was just kind of keep moving the kids along. And it was just get them assignments. And so I'm looking for, and I didn't feel like she really learned a whole lot. It was really about just keep doing a little bit of math, keep doing a little bit of this. And it was really just kind of plodding along to get here to the end. And her teacher, it was stressful. She had her own children at home. She definitely had her own things to work through. And I definitely understood all of that. And, you know, we tried to work through that as best as possible. Definitely understand all of that. I guess I'm just looking for a little clarification as to what the message was. Was there different messaging for elementary versus middle school? Will that be changing as you look at distance learning and the modeling going forward? Those are my questions.
Okay. I would share with you that the messaging wasn't really different before spring break. We did have the challenges when we initially closed about any new learning, and some of that had to do with even the challenges we face with students with disabilities and IEPs. But there should have been ongoing learning that was taking place. I think what I want to address is when I speak to the work that we're trying to do for next fall and identifying teachers this summer, I think that's the piece hopefully that will change that, is because those individuals that are, everybody will be receiving that same support related to essential standards from the same individuals. Now, teachers might vary that a little bit because those teachers that are working this summer won't be the teacher of records. So Susan, for example, if you and I were both teachers and you might be the one that develops the lessons this summer, you may have a group of kids you're working with in the fall, but I may be a teacher that's even, let's say I'm medically fragile and I can't come back to the class in the fall. I will probably have a caseload of students who will be, I will be working with and supporting, that might not even be all from the same school, but from the same grade. Because here's what's going to happen. Kids are not going to come in nice, neat little packages. We're not going to have 24 second graders from school X that decide to stay home and 24 that go to school. So we're really going to have to be flexible and pivot. There's all kinds of factors. I shared with the Teachers Association with administrators last week. You may have two teachers that are both kinder and both two first grade teachers that are medically fragile. So if a school doesn't have that, how do we address the need? We're even going to have to be flexible when it comes to the fall in terms of moving teaching staff around where we need it. Now, we're trying to get in front of that as much as we can now. But it's almost like in the fall, until you actually see who shows up, we can ask as many and survey and try and get as much information as we can, but it's really, really challenging to know exactly what we need. So we're trying to have all of those conversations already, but I would say that's going to be the biggest piece, hopefully, of us addressing that. And I see lots of hands raised, so Susan, I'm going to let Trent move on to the next one.
Thank you, Susan. Next, we have Wendy, and Wendy, you maybe. Wendy, you should be unmuted.
Okay, thank you. My biggest concern, I'm here for Laura Ruff and for special ed. And first of all, I would like to thank Kent and the board and all of you guys, because I think you had a monumental task and everybody dove in, and we all can find things wrong with it, but on the whole, I think we all should commend everybody's efforts for what they were able to pull off. But regarding special ed students, I think it's a large part of our population, and there is a really big hole with distance learning. And even if we're looking at a hybrid thing, these are a lot of, I guess my concern is coming from students. I've been on a number of Zoom calls with parents. You know, these kids need routine. And how is a hybrid going to work for a student who needs that routine? And how do we address our really severe mod population and those kids who are like Ralph Richardson Center? And I mean, my biggest concern when this all started was like, do the deaf kids have their equipment? Do the blind kids have their equipment? I mean, these things that don't fall into the normal distance learning, but these kids deserve the opportunity to succeed just like everyone else. And what are we doing about it? Because it's a big hole. And I will say the social aspect at Laurel Ruff, Dale instituted some things just from a social aspect that she started with all the students on Zoom that for me made me cry, hearing these kids scream because they could see each other. And they were just like, they missed seeing everybody and knowing everybody else was alive.
Well, Wendy, thank you for that. Let me say this. As I kind of said, one size doesn't fit all.
Yeah.
Special ed might look different because if we're able, and I'll share with the group. So we've already looked at Frank Camarda, our senior director of or assistant super facilities, whatever his job is now, okay, brought forward maps of classes throughout the district, square footage, and what those maps would look like in the number of students that we could fit into classes, okay, because that's the guidelines that we're having to follow right now.
Yeah.
But with our special ed students, it might look different because if you have a class with 8 or 10 kids, we may be able to offer something different for those students than others. We just, at this point in time, I don't know that we can say for sure what that will look like. The other challenge is the staffing is what will be our capacity to staff those sites if we have medically fragile staff, both instructional assistants and a teaching staff. So that's going to play into it a little bit as well, Wendy, because if we have, let's just say at Laurel Ruff or Ralph Richardson, we have 4 teachers that can't be there or 4 instructional assistants. There's a certain piece that we're not going to be able to offer. So how do we shift and move from there? But as we broke out to really start looking in the fall, we broke it out into really ECE, kind of our elementary division, middle, and then high, and then secondary, and embedded in every one of those were conversations about our students with disabilities and how we meet their needs.
Okay.
So that is a huge challenge, but it is something that has been at the forefront. And when you talk about the relationship piece, and Melissa alluded to this a little bit, that is probably going to be our #1 concern when we get to the fall, because the social emotional state of our students across the board, when I met with my student group, I met with them twice, to take relationships away from kids and the interaction with friends
Yep.
is challenging. And I've shared this publicly with a couple of folks. In my mind, I'm going to use 2 examples. I'm going to use a kindergartner. I'm going into kindergarten. There are a lot of kids that are going to go into kindergarten next year that are afraid. But they're going to be building relationships with other kids for the first time in their lives. And how do we not have some social piece to get them so that they can start building that as well? They need to. When I went to high school, I went from Arcade to Bella Vista. Didn't really know anybody. The first 2, I was scared. The first 2 weeks I ate lunch with my sister. It was really scary to go to a school where you didn't know anybody. And we want to pay attention and we want to support those students. And there are other grades where that's the case as well. So that a social emotional piece is huge. So I'm going to keep moving. We didn't put a time limit on this meeting. So I'm going to stay on as long as I need to. Other staff, if you need to leave, leave. Other folks, if you need to leave, leave. But I think I have until about 3:30. So however long this takes, I'm committed to staying on. So Trent, let's move to the next question.
All right. Thank you, Wendy. And next will be Jennifer. Jennifer, you should. My unmute button is taking a moment, so give it just a second. There you go, Jennifer. You should be able to go now.
Thank you very much, Trent. I also just wanted to express my gratitude to everybody for hosting this meeting. I'm very happy that we're able to have an opportunity for dialogue. I think one of the primary questions that I had was just regarding the decision surrounding the hybrid model. How was it determined that it would be 2 days on site and 3 days remote? Why not 3 days on site and 2 days remote? I just was curious how the 2 days was decided on.
Okay, so realistically, what we're looking at is we're going to probably be able to get 14 or 15 students in a classroom. And so we know that we're going to have still, let's say 30 kids, 34 kids that need econ, biology, second grade at Ottoman. And so those we're going to break those out into 2 cohorts. And so that's really the capacity. And when you've heard at the state level about requiring the social distancing, that's what we have the capacity to do. If we were to do 3 days, then there would be another group of kids on the campus, because we're probably going to only have half the kids at the school each of those days. So Jennifer, that was really the basis for that decision. Now, again, that's with the information that we have at this point in time. But that's how we really looked at the 2 days.
Thank you. I think that's about it for me for now.
Thanks, Jennifer.
Thank you, Jennifer. And next will be Ali. And you should have your microphone open, sir.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes, thank you so much. Thanks, Kent. I appreciate it for having this meeting. Many information was presented was new to me, and these are very helpful. I was listening to Melissa and presenting 6 priorities, strategic priorities. One of them was focused instruction. And I learned that it means that they building block standards for students. My recommendation that if it is possible, there is a need to, considering this distance learning or hybrid model to become a new normal, there's a need to develop protocols also for teachers, some standard guidelines for teachers. As you can mention some of them, they are very different, lack of consistency among the teachers. My daughters go both to Churchill and also to Detterding. The teachers from the same school, one of them does not teach at all. She puts problems on the classroom, Google Classroom, put the solutions over there. It says whenever you are done, just click here, then submit. You already submitted. There's no need to submit this to me, anything. On the other hand, there are teachers who teach every day, and they have a very realistic expectation that the student do the homework and then do the quiz, do the test, do the project. So to shorten my discussion here, I just want to request, if it's possible, to add in your priorities, developing some standard guidelines also for teachers while you're working with the Teachers Association. Thank you.
Thank you all. I appreciate that. And I can share with you that is something that we are discussing with the Teachers Association. We meet with them. Well, we had a meeting this morning for 2 hours with our leadership and their leadership. But there are, Melissa, could you speak to probably how many other meetings are going on that are involving them as well?
So weekly, I'm probably in meetings with them, just myself, at least 4 meetings a week. And in addition to that, there's other meetings that are occurring with other departments. So it is a very big, it's a robust conversation, and we are working together. And the variability is across teachers is something that has been a big part of the conversation.
Yeah, so I appreciate that. And that is something that even I wish I had a magic wand and we'd have that consistency, but that's really why we're trying to develop the plan we are for the fall. When I originally shared this idea with the Teachers Association about identifying teachers, in my mind, I was thinking we were going to have, Melissa, it was probably 10 to 15 people, okay? And my two board members, Pam's eyes will probably go like this and so will Mike's. The number that we were talking about that would be working on this summer this morning is 83. So we're talking about 2 teachers per grade level for ELA and math, looking at those essential standards, K through 5. You get to 6th grade, we're talking about 6th, 7th, and 8th, you're talking about social studies, math, science, English. You get to high school, we're looking at math, multiple teachers working on those. The same for science, the same. Now, some of your AP classes and those other classes we won't have. Even today, I said, look, I want to add one more. I want to add a teacher this summer that's just going to work on virtual field trips, because we still need to have some of those experiences for kids. And I know parents want to have an opportunity for kids to do that. So we're going to have a teacher this summer that's going to be developing virtual field trips. So when we get to the fall, if we don't have the opportunity to do some of those things, people still will. So your comment, Ollie, is exactly what I heard as well from my student group when I met with them about the consistency. And that has been probably the biggest frustration for students, for parents, and then I would say for many of us as well. So thank you for bringing that up. All right, Trent, next one.
Thank you, Ollie. And our next is Violet. And Violet, you should be unmuted.
Thank you so much. Superintendent Kern, I can't tell you how excited I am as a parent and also as the SPAC representative from Del Deo. I have one 4th grader there and I have a 6th grader at Churchill. I cannot tell you how excited I am to be able to say, to hear rather, that there will be strong teachers developing lessons over the summer. I want to thank them in advance for that and thank all of you for all the hard work that you've put into this. That answers a lot of questions that that parents have had. We had a PTO meeting last week, and many parents, well-meaning parents, said they are not teachers. They don't know how to teach their kids and that their children need instruction, not just lessons. And so as helpful as lessons were as a stopgap, we understand completely that needed to happen to get assignments out there and to keep kids busy. But that this will just really, I think, be a great endeavor. So I commend you on that for sure. Having that common experience with lessons and teaching instruction just sounds fabulous. So kudos to your team for coming up with that. I think that sounds amazing. Couple of questions that came up, and these are not necessarily my questions, but I wrote them down from our meeting. One question was about a potential hybrid model and siblings, and what siblings might, that experience might be within a family. If you have children even at the same school, they be going on the same days? If you have students at 3 schools, would they all be going on the same days, or would they be attending school on various days? You also addressed the student stress and the parent stress, the social emotional needs.
Violet, let me try and answer that first question you had, okay?
Yes, go ahead.
My next meeting that I'm going to be on is actually with the elementary principals, okay? And I'm trying to answer some questions that they've been put forth. I think it would only be fair for families to have their students at school on the same day. So in my mind, we will do everything possible to make that happen. Now that gets a little more challenging if you have a student in an elementary, a middle, and a high, but I still think we should be able to have the capacity to do that. And so I appreciate you bringing that forward. I see Melissa writing some stuff down. We need to be communicating that and get out in front of that. I think we've thought about it more at just the individual levels, but that will be important that we can, at least provide that.
It sounded like it came from a place of people who weren't able to be at home with their kids that might be going back to work, and transportation issues certainly would be a concern there. The next question was in regards, and this might be something that we can't address right this moment, but that maybe over the next 10 weeks we would have time to develop. But there have been some gaps that have occurred over this time, just some natural gaps in learning that have happened over the past 2.5 months that may continue even over the summer. And so if that can be a priority for the district to look at how they might be closing in on those gaps with additional supports for students, particularly in the area of reading, is a concern.
Yeah, I'll share with you. Melissa was on a webinar. Was that well, it had to be sometime last week. I think there were 700 participants throughout the country with a national research firm called EAB that we work with. And they were sharing that they looked at Hurricane Katrina because the schools were shut down for 4 months, Melissa, is that correct? You can nod. And the learning loss that occurred during those 4 months took 2 years to recapture. So we have tremendous concerns about when we come back at whatever point it is where the new normal is, okay? It's going to take a significant amount of time. I believe the gaps that you're speaking about are going to be much greater than when we left, when we closed. On March 13th, it's going to be greater. Now, when I get to the point where I share the budget situation and you see the challenges we're faced with, but I will share with you some of the ideas we have. We're going to get some one-time money this next year. And I've said, will there be opportunities to possibly even offer a 6th day of school this year, such as a Saturday school for some students that need it, if we would have the available funds to do that. So we are looking at, could there be some of those options for our EL or just our neediest learners who have fallen. So those are the types of things that we're looking at. Until we really have a clear picture on our budget, it's hard to plan some of those things that may cost more. And one other thing I want to share in terms of getting information out, I was sitting at home last night thinking about after the county piece came out. I know, as I said, people want answers, people want information. And I said to my wife, I feel like I need to do a fireside chat with the entire district. And I said to Trent this morning, I think what I'm going to do in the next couple of weeks is just sit down and do a video. I'm just going to talk to the community, to our parents, and share with them what I think is going to be taking place in the fall so that people can hear that, because folks need to be reassured. Now, like I said, if we do this, they're going to be upset. If we do that, they're going to be upset. We're going to offer the best that we can. But I think people just really need to hear so that they can be reassured. And I would encourage all of you to take what you've heard today and share that with others who have questions as well. All right.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Trent, next. Trent, you're on mute.
Thank you, Violet. And next should be Joanne. Joanne, you should be unmuted.
Hi there, thank you. I'm Joanne McConaughey. I'm representing Earl Leggett Elementary School. And looks like 2 questions and a comment from some of our parents. The first one was around what you were talking about earlier, that there would be a bolstering and more availability for the independent learning for parents who may not be comfortable for whatever reason sending the kids back to school. And you may be getting into this more so with the budget piece of things, but do you know if there will still be budget allotments for those parents who elect to do more of a homeschooling model through those helper participants, or if that may or may not be available?
Share with me a little bit more what your thinking is when you say a budget allotment.
So one of the parents had brought up that, and I don't know any details of this, but if you elect to do a homeschooling model, and so this is elementary age, that there's some sort of a payment or a budget that's set aside where those parents are getting compensated for essentially doing the teaching, or possibly it's for getting the curriculum, I'm unsure. But they were concerned that if they did elect to go to that model, if that funding would even be available, especially if there's an increase of parents who are going to possibly taking that direction.
So what it is usually those programs offer support for curriculum or other things, some things that there are costs related to. We haven't had a lot of conversations about that right now, but the reality is I think students still have a homeschool. So like if I'm from Leggett, I went to Leggett. So let's say, my parents chose to keep me at home. There might be a way, and we need to think this through, that the needs. Schools are still purchasing materials and supplies, although we're reducing those budgets. You know, what could we help and support? The curriculum we will still provide. We will have the curriculum, we'll have the supports. So it's a good question that I can't completely answer at this time.
Okay. Another question was stemming from the open enrollment process. Obviously, we know everybody is super inundated with everything going on, but myself included, but there's a bunch of folks who are in TK at Leggett trying to get in permanently in that kindergarten year. Obviously, with some kids doing at-home learning, is that open enrollment process even still going, or is it going to be come August, September, October, all the way through possibly December is when people will be finding things like that out?
No, I think we're still, that process is still there. In fact, I just visited Central Enrollment yesterday and was talking with staff because they're going to be heating up. So we have those lists of people that we're waiting, and we'll continue to watch that. I think that the challenging part will be, we have no idea how long, or again, we don't know what it's going to look like in August. We're trying to plan as best we can, or how long this is going to last next year. So at some point, there will probably be more available seats at schools, and we're going to need to try and fill them up. So that's something we're looking at. So what I would say is that we haven't shoved that aside. We'll probably continue the process as we normally would. But the one thing we'll want to be careful about is if, let's say at Leggett, there were 10 kindergarten students and their parents, and they were enrolled there, but they say, now we're going to keep our kids at home. If we fill up all those slots with other people who are trying to get in, and then in November, all of a sudden, there's a miracle and the world changes and we're back to normal. What happens to those 10 kids that's their home school? That's what we're going to have to be really careful about still.
Got it. That makes sense. There was an additional question before the comment a parent had brought up. Obviously, it's all going to be very fluid. There's a lot of different models, and that continuum is going to move. But should there be a resurgence come fall or winter time, obviously the let's get everyone home has happened once before, but are there different protocols that should be expected to see happening, especially if we have a hybrid or even a traditional program before it happens?
Well, I think that one of the reasons why we're putting into place this development during the summer of these lessons are for that exact reason. All of a sudden, if we have to, I'm not sure, well, I'm not sure of any. But let's say we close down just a school instead of the whole district. How do we, if we have an outbreak at a school, how do we support that school? So that's why we're even shifting some of the instructional pieces that we are, so that we'll be prepared for that.
Okay, perfect. And then the last one was just a comment from one of the parents. Actually, there were two of them in particular who had come across this. Some of the kids were kind of in that 4th to 6th grade range. They're doing a lot of self-directed learning. They're doing a lot of the assignments that have been put up. And they had noticed that there are not a lot of controls around YouTube, because a lot of times YouTube is used in an educational purpose, but the kids were able to access way more than the lockdown they have at home. In fact, we're coming across very inappropriate content, or just able to really diverge their learning while the parents are right there working, but they just don't notice it. Will there be any technological advances put in place to help monitor that for at least, the younger grades?
Trent, can you answer that better than I can?
So certainly when we have everybody on the district network, it gives us a level of control and ability. And one of the things we had to do when we were quickly dispersing the Chromebooks is unlock all of those devices so that they would work on everybody's home networks. So certainly if you're on that Chromebook on the home network, we have those unlocked at the moment. I know our tech services folks are looking at, is there a blended piece in between where we can perhaps, even if you're on your home network, still route that connection through the district when you're using it for district work, or if you're using that Chromebook at home, so that we can have those filters still in place that will give us a higher level of control over some of those pieces. So it is a conversation we're having. I can't tell you that we have a perfect answer ready to go right this second, but it is a conversation that's happening.
I think it is pretty difficult when to have the types of controls that we would like. Our priority was to get those devices into people's hands. We've passed out over 21,000 devices. I will share with you, we have no idea how many of those we're going to get back. We've already purchased We already spent $1.5 million of this year's budget to buy more for next year, so that we're prepared. But we had like 15,000 plus devices that are actually at their end of their life. So again, when I talk about the budget, you'll hear some of the challenges with that. So thank you, Joanna.
All right, thank you.
And next will be Shannon. And Shannon, you should have the ability to.
Muted.
You are.
Okay. So I had several questions. First of all, again, I appreciate what everyone's done. It's been crazy times. My kids have thrived on distance learning. So we were one of the few people that said, yeah, this is great. My son, who I always struggled with, to get his homework in and everything, he's getting A's and B's. So we, we're like, yes, get grades. So we appreciate that option for high school. I kind of wish that we had the option for middle school, because my daughter likes straight A's, and now she's going, I just get credit or no credit. So she's kind of wish she had the option to choose grades for that as well. But no big deal on that one. One of the things that I'm worried about or wondering about is going back to school. I know we're going to be doing social distancing and encouraging possibly masks. I have 2 kids who have asthma, and so wearing masks for them aren't going to be healthy for them to wear all day. Do we know kind of where things are maybe standing on that, whether masks will be required or not? Because I've also gone to the grocery store and seen that most people don't wear them even if they say to. So, and my kids are like, none of the kids at school are going to wear masks even if they tell us to. So just kind of wondering your thoughts on that, where the district's going.
Yeah, I think, and if you haven't seen, the county kind of came out with some guidelines, and that's what you're seeing from all of these larger organizations. They don't really give us directives. They kind of say, here's what we think, now go do what you need to do. I think it's pretty challenging to say that we could require, mandate that folks wear masks. It's like I said, there are people that absolutely say, I'm not sending them back unless everybody does. If you require, I'm not going to. So it's hard, like you mentioned with your students with asthma. There are lots of factors that come into play with that. I think we will have recommendations when it comes down to it, but a hard line that you absolutely must do X, Y, or Z. There's even some factors that come into play about free and appropriate education. And if you're saying you have to do this, but now you're not letting them come to school, where are we legally with that?
Right.
So we're trying to be sensitive and attentive to that. There's a certain percentage of teachers in a survey that they took who said, if masks were required to wear them, would you? And 20% said no, for whatever reason. Some folks are very comfortable with them. Some folks feel very, very claustrophobic with them. Mm-hmm. So there's many factors that come into play. So it's one of those things that we're going to continue to look at. That's a hard one. So.
Okay. Yeah, because I need to protect my kids because of their asthma, but at the same time, they can't go all day in a mask and be healthy. So totally understand that. One of the problems, and I have one at CASA and one at Carnegie. So the teachers have been great. So I'm glad to hear about the recorded teacher that you guys are thinking about in a way, because I know my sister, her daughter's at Sylvan and really struggling. She just started there 2 weeks before, the stay-at-home order lifted or went down. So they had never even used Google Classroom or anything. But they're really struggling with some of their teachers. But my kids have had wonderful teachers. So the only worry I have with the recording teacher thing is that they're presenting somebody else's lesson. So if the kids have questions, they can't, I don't know what that teacher meant, or I don't know, you have to do this, but that's their plan. So how is that going to be addressed?
Melissa, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, so the intention of the videos is to be a part of the classroom teacher's lesson plan. So the idea is that the videos, the online content, so the videos that are created or the activities are done prior to a student coming to school for we were in hybrid model. So it's really a time for us to pre-teach and build in that background knowledge so that when they get to school, the intention is that we follow up with differentiation, we have consultation, one-on-one time with students. We're able to really go deeper into the lesson. So when those videos are implemented, it's the intention that it's connected to the teacher's overall lesson that the student's going to experience when they get to class. It's called flipping the classroom, where you're doing the instruction prior to students coming into the room.
Okay. Okay. And then my daughter loves choir and band, and I know those things are going to be difficult subjects. So we already signed up for her first elective is choir, her second elective is band, and I'm going, oh no, you know, when it comes time to August, let's say those classes aren't available, are they going to give the students time again to choose a different elective because, oh, those classes aren't available anymore?
All right, anything else, Shannon?
Oh, did you hear the one about the
Yeah, I heard your
I'm
question.
sorry, I was hoping I had
That's
people.
okay.
Let me grab it.
Thank
So we are looking at the county health guidelines around those electives, particularly when it comes to instruments and choir. And so we're going to do our best to see what we can do in a social distancing format. And when that can't be achieved, if we need to pivot and not provide an elective, we are going to provide time for students to find alternatives. So it's one of those things that's kind of in progress because the guidelines, like right now for choir, it's okay if you can maintain social distancing. So when students are in school, if we have a room that allows for the 6 feet of space, then we can go ahead and do it. So, but that there's variability across the facilities based off the size of the room. So it is something that's considered, but we are being very mindful of the options for our students and giving them opportunity to pivot if we can't provide it.
Okay. And one more question, the homeschooling thing, I know you guys touched on that a little bit. If say they go to hybrid and then kind of say, hey, this isn't working, how quickly can they change back and forth between the programs? Like, oh, or is it kind of, hey, you choose hybrid, you're stuck on hybrid?
We haven't gotten to that point yet in terms of how much time, but that is something for us to think about because things are fluid. And so just like we're trying to plan with very fluid information, I know our families are too. I don't have an answer for that.
I'm hopeful that we'll be able to accommodate folks, again, based on the needs that they have. Let me just ask the group a question, and if you've got an issue with this, just send Nan an email. There was a request, as someone was having problems with the link. We are recording this meeting, so we actually could share this meeting if folks are okay with that. If you're not, do me a favor, and usually the recording, and Trent can help me with this, the recording is always the speaker view, correct, Trent, or the shared screen?
That may be dependent upon the account settings. So,
okay. But if you have concerns about us sharing this, just email Nan. But if she doesn't hear, we probably will post this because this will be a good opportunity for folks to be able to jump in and watch that. All right, Trent, who has the next question?
All right, thank you, Shannon. And next will be Kelsey. And Kelsey, you should be open. Nope.
5, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. I have 5 kids. 4 of them are school age. They go to 3 different schools I have elementary at Cowan, middle school at Arcade, and high school at El Camino. And I have lots and lots of questions, but I'll ask 2 of them. The first one is that whichever model you set for that starts in August with the kids, is that the model that will stay for the entire year? Like if come October that second wave doesn't come, or if kids aren't getting sick, then will we consider after Christmas coming back to just a full-time traditional?
Well, let me answer that. Okay.
Okay.
I think really, again, we are going to be following the guidelines of the public health officials. And if we get to a point where it is safe for whatever reason, whether it's a vaccine or something else, that we're able to move from a hybrid to a 5-day model, we would try and do that, because I think you're going to have it's best for students if they're in class every day with a teacher. And so the sooner we can do that, the better. You mitigate learning loss more. Now, probably many of you here are helping support and, really making sure your students are getting, that's not the case with everybody. We don't have all the same, abilities. So that's where we would like to see us get back to whatever that new normal is as soon as possible.
Okay. Yeah, I feel like I've had the ability to help my kids because of my job situation, but I've told my kids, like, there's so many of your classmates who are not getting help at home, and I just can't even imagine what that's like for them. But my second question is there any consideration? My high schooler does an independent study class through El Sereno so that he could fit in extra classes. Is there any consideration of making certain schools independent study schools, and certain schools a traditional school, and certain schools a hybrid school? Now, I do recognize that that would be hard, but no matter what we do, it's going to be hard. But would that meet the kids that want to go to school and feel healthy enough to do that? The teachers, the same kind of allow that kind of division to happen? Is that a possibility? Because my kids want to go to school.
Yeah, so we had that conversation, and the reality is there's tremendous equity issues there, because if you choose, in some communities, how would students get from where they want to go to one other site? And so, like I said, we batted all those ideas around, and that was one of those that really probably creates more equity issues than it addresses. So that isn't something that we would consider. As Melissa alluded to, we actually want to expand that El Sereno, La Entrada, what they're able to do over there. And that there may be that there's that piece associated at each of the high schools. There could be a class where that is offered at each of the high schools. But I think all the schools that currently are seat-based will continue to be seat-based. It might be, what else could we do at those sites to support students?
Okay.
All right, Trent. And you're on mute, Trent.
Thank you, Kelsey. Next up will be Jamie. And Jamie, you should have your mic coming open right now.
Hi. I just have a quick question, and it's mainly, I understand that we don't have a crystal ball and we can't say exactly what's going to happen, but do we have maybe a target as to when any decisions will be made? I think that would help calm a lot of parents if they knew, by August 15th or August 1st, we will have a better idea as to exactly what we're expecting. And then parents could also make a better decision as to what they want to do with their students.
Jamie, I missed the first part of that. When you said we don't have, you said?
Just kind of a target as to when a decision will be made.
A decision around what? That's the part I missed.
About are we going to do traditional? Are we going to be looking at a hybrid? Just, like I said, I don't expect something in black and white, this is what it is, but just an idea to be able to share with people. Okay, we're hoping by, August 1st, we're going to know what we're doing.
Yeah, we're actually hoping to communicate in the month of June, district-wide, what we're sharing with you today and what Melissa shared about the different models.
Okay.
We even talked about, in our meeting today with SJTA, doing it before the end of the school year. But in talking with Trent, he had some real good input on why it may be better to wait as people are really focusing on wrapping up the year and that message could get lost. But I think at some point in time in June, we will communicate the options, and then we will try and reach out and really find out what people will want to do, because that'll be important. The more planning we can do earlier, the better prepared we will be when we get to August. So that's probably what where our thinking is right now that we will communicate what we know now, what the fall looks like as soon as we can.
Okay, so just to clarify, are you saying like by the end of June, you'll be able to say that if we do the hybrid model, it'll be this, or if we do traditional, it'll be this? But
Yeah,
being able to know.
I think we would communicate that slide that Melissa showed where it showed the different models. I think we'll want to communicate that this month so that people can start thinking, oh, okay, do I want to do a hybrid model? Do I want to do the homeschool? Do I want to do, you know, whatever it would be that they choose, that people can start thinking about how that would work for them.
Okay.
All right.
All right, thank you.
Yep.
Thank you, Jamie. And next is Angelina. And Angelina, your mic should be coming open, maybe. Angelina?
Okay, there we go.
There you go.
Yeah, I echo everyone else's sentiments about the hard work you've all put in. Thank you very much. I have an Eagle over at El Camino who is in band, so thank you, Shannon, for your question about band. I have a question that I don't think anyone's posed yet. What's going to happen with the hybrid model in terms of fall sports?
Great question. The county did come out with some recommendations related to that. I just had a call from a superintendent in the area that's actually trying to get folks together. It's Chris Evans from Natomas. If you want to look in the B today, he wrote an op-ed about that. It's challenging to think that certain sports could happen. My son plays football in college. I have no idea whether or not he's going to be able to do that this fall. So that is a conversation where I think we need a lot more information. But we are very aware of how programs like sports or band or drama or those types of things those are what keep a lot of kids engaged and involved in school. But I think, as Melissa said, and I will share with you, I've heard this loud and clear from the board, that safety of our students and staff is a huge priority. So that's going to be something that we take into consideration as we think about what sports could look like.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks for your question.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Angelina. And next is Jaren. And your
Hi.
mic, there you go.
I'm on my son's name apparently, so I didn't change that. I had a question about shared spaces such as playgrounds and cafeterias at the elementary school level. What will that look like?
It's a great question. We've got all kinds of ideas. In fact, I was in cabinet on Monday. I was talking with Frank about going out and walking some of the sites. Some of the guidelines are that cafeterias, for example, would be that students would eat lunch in their classrooms. Now, the challenge with that is in our agreement with our Teachers Association, because teachers need breaks too, they're supposed to have a 30-minute duty-free lunch. So who supervises the kids if the teachers? So we're batting around some creative ideas where maybe they get their 30-minute duty-free lunch twice a week, and we're trying to come up with all kinds of ideas. With maybe, let's say, if normally a school has 500 kids, now they're down to 250 coming those days. If 125 of them ate in the cafeteria, can we successfully socially distance students? Playgrounds, what we're looking at is, are there specific areas that classes could have for their playground use? And with a smaller class, then what does that look like? So those are the things we're looking at, and this is a conversation that we're having not only in our district, but throughout the region. I will share with you, I meet once a week with all of the superintendents and the county superintendent. And those are the kind of conversations we're having because we want to learn from each other. Some, as you guys are well aware, some facilities are better equipped than others in terms of space, additional space, but we're looking at all of those factors in order. And so right now, I don't really have an answer exactly what that will look like in the fall.
Okay.
Thank you for that. And going next to Jennifer for our last question.
Hi again, thank you very much. My question is regarding the miraculous the miraculous ability to have the shelter-in-place order lifted because of, you know, possible availability of treatments and possible vaccines. I know that there's a lot of people in the community who understand that good science takes time, and that the first vaccine that may be available, there may be a lot of public concern about that particular vaccine's efficacy. Would the district require students to have said vaccine in order to return to a traditional model?
I legally, and I don't want to get too far over my skis on this. I don't think we could require a vaccine. You know, there are a lot of people who are anti-vaccine, and so that's something. In order to say you couldn't come back to school unless you have the vaccine, I think again we get into some real challenges, and there may be people even that for medical reasons couldn't have that vaccine. So again, I don't want to be too specific on that, but I think that would be very challenging for us to think that we could mandate a vaccine in order for students to return.
That is unlikely at the local district level to be mandated. Whether the state would add that to that list of vaccines that's required at specific grade levels or for all grade levels, that would be another conversation perhaps.
All right, I appreciate that information. Thank you.
All right, and I'm going to jump into this budget conversation, and for my staff that's here, they're probably surprised that I figured out how to do this. The question is, can I figure out how to move slide to slide? And the answer is no.
Click.
I'm trying, Trent. Okay, Trent's going to come in here and give me a quick lesson on this. All right, thank you, sir. Okay, let me jump right into this here. I took a couple of slides out of the presentation that we're going to share to the board on Tuesday night. And what you will see here is the governor in his May revision made a recommendation. When our budget was developed, we were looking at that we were going to get a 2.31 COLA, and COLA stands for cost of living adjustment. So the amount of revenue that the district was going to receive was, you can see the $337 million along with additional $37 million in supplemental grants. So that comes to $374 million that we would have received. The governor's budget proposal made a 10% reduction, which really what comes down to is 7.92 because we lost the 2.31 COLA. And what I want to share with you there is you can see the lost revenue in our district if the governor's proposal was to be accepted by the state senate and the assembly would mean that we would lose over $37 million in revenue. Now that is a significant cut to say the least. And so there's a number of factors that we're going to have to be paying attention to this next year. Now I will tell you that I think that number, after talking with folks downtown, our local assembly members and others, I'm hopeful it's more closer to a 4% total cut to the district, but you can still see that would mean we would have a lost revenue for this next year of $23 million. How do you make up for lost revenue of $23 million when the time to make a lot of these cuts has already passed? So I want to share with you some of the thoughts that we have related to this. So, and I need to minimize that. So right there, at the top, Mr. Stevens had here that our loss would be $37.4 million. We are going to receive some funds from the Federal Stimulus CARES Act for our district. That'll be a little over $10 million. So that will, but all of these funds I'm going to be talking about are potentially one-time funds. So they don't really fix our problem. They fix our problem for next year, but they don't fix the long-term problem. And what I will constantly be sharing with the board is that we have a structural deficit that we have to address. And really to address our structural deficit, we're going to have to make some very hard decisions this next year. So we will be getting some of that federal stimulus money. We're trying to get as much FEMA dollars as we can, but interestingly enough, as we've applied, we at one point were hoping we could get $4 million. We continue to be getting turned down. So ultimately what that is, we're not sure. In the governor's budget, he has $4.4 billion that he has a plan how to spend it. We believe in our district, we will get some of that. It is, as you see under the description, one time for instructional loss. Kind of the ridiculous part of this, though, is whatever we get, they want us to spend by December 30th of this year. So in order to do that, that's going to be really challenging, but we're already processing how we could do that. You heard Melissa share that we have provided over 300,000 meals during this time, but we have actually lost a significant amount of revenue because that is far less meals than we would have normally provided, and we get reimbursed from the feds for the meals we provide. So we're expecting that loss in our meal program to probably be $1.5 million in lost revenue or reimbursement that we would have got from the state. You can see we've lost some dollars we would have gained from use of facilities. And then lastly, we're expecting a pretty significant loss for career technical education, adult education, and after-school programs because the governor is proposing a 50% reduction to those in his budget. Then when we look at some of the major, what we're trying to do to address this already, we have put a hiring freeze in place. So realistically, all positions at this point that are unfilled will remain unfilled unless they get approved by myself in cabinet. So for example, this week, one of our assistant superintendents brought forward 5 positions. 2 of them were plant managers at schools or head custodians. Those have to be filled, especially when we talk about cleaning and everything that's going to be going on in the fall. One other was contractually required, but 2 of them were leads groundskeeper or groundskeepers. We're not filling those positions at this time. So what's the outcome of that? Our schools may not have the grounds looking as well as they may have in previous years. Those are the kind of sacrifices we're going to have to make. So we believe that our temporary pause will save us at least $2 million. I'm hoping that will be significantly more than that. There were some changes in the governor's budget around the pension rates. That will be a reduction. We expect to have utility savings, not sure exactly what that is. We did make reductions to supplies, materials, and some professional development. Initially, we also were planning to cut travel conference in the district by 35% for next year. I made a change to that to 85%. So there will be very little travel conference that will take place next year. But we do expect to see a significant increase in cleaning supplies. I mentioned we already spent $1.5 million on technology devices. In cabinet this past week, we just approved over $400,000 in PPE equipment. So masks for staff, cleaning supplies, hand sanitizers in every single classroom, the hand sanitizers dispensers. So those are the kind of things that are going to increase costs. Let me get out of that. So I wanted to give you a kind of a high level overview. When we are talking about cutting somewhere between $20,000 and $30,000 out of our budget, you can't do that unless you the majority of our budget is in people. And so you can't do that unless in the long run, you are reducing people and positions. So what does that look like? That is a conversation that will really be taking place next year in the fall. And there's going to be a lot of hard discussions and a lot of hard decisions that we have to make as a district around that and around making those reductions. And so when we get together in the fall again, we will be providing this group with more specific information, and we'll want to hear your feedback about what are the areas you potentially think we could make some reductions in. Where do you say we absolutely can't reduce in these areas? Because we want to involve the community in that conversation as well. because it's important that they are involved in the conversation. So it's kind of a very high level overview, but I think it shares with you the challenges that we're going to be faced with. I was having a conversation with General Davey, who was a former superintendent, and General said as superintendent, he went through some really challenging budget cuts. And he said, but I never went through budget cuts during a time when there was a worldwide pandemic and we were trying to educate the students completely differently. We are going to have to actually get more dollars to better provide and support our students for this next year. But my biggest concern when it comes to the budget is when I look at years 21, 22, we're headed towards a cliff. So we have to make some really sound fiscal decisions. And I will share with you, we have. The board has provided outstanding leadership over the past, as long as I've been superintendent. And we have made, there are some districts, if you follow in the region, that are having some major financial challenges. It's going to get a lot worse for everybody in the state. We've made really wise decisions, and going forward, we will continue. We have given probably the smallest percentage of raises to our employees over the last 5-6 years than any district. So we're better positioned to weather this storm than some others. Some other districts may have a larger ending fund balance than we do. But I think I am very confident in the team that we have in place, that we will be able to make the decisions. I will tell you, budget is one of my areas of strength. So hopefully this comes into play for us as we go through what's going to be a really challenging 2 to 3 years just in the budgetary piece of it. So at this time, again, I'd like to open it up for any just general questions on the topic of budget as well. And if you want to raise your hand, and hopefully Trent is around, but I can always help out as well. So Trent, I see Wendy has her hand up.
And Wendy, you should be unmuted. Go ahead.
When you're looking at budget, I guess okay. We've been paying a lot of people for this school year. You've been paying librarians that aren't working, bus drivers that aren't working. There's a lot of people being paid by the district that are not working. I think there's a lot of resentment out there for teachers being paid, and they're not teaching. They won't answer parents' emails. And you've got a lot of folks out there who have lost their jobs and aren't working. And they're like, I can't get unemployment. These people ain't doing anything, and the district's paying them. So I kind of like, why are we paying all these people? Is there nothing we could have them do? I know some people in transportation have gotten called back. I know at some schools are utilizing IAs on Zoom calls, but I hear of playground people, all these people are getting checks and not doing anything.
Yeah, Wendy, I think that will look different when it comes to the fall, because we were already budgeted for this year. And so there was kind of, even when the governor shut it down, there was an expectation that certain people and positions continue to be paid. We're looking at each of those. I'll share with you, though, one area. Like we're bringing back our bus drivers to provide some, it's not security, but support at our school sites, so that when there aren't folks there, there's at least someone there. But I'll use bus drivers as a good example.
Okay.
And let's think about special ed here, because we already have a bus driver shortage.
I know.
If we were to lay off bus drivers, a lot of those people could go get jobs somewhere else. Okay. And when we need them back, we would not have the drivers to transport our special ed kids to school the way we need to. Now, I'm hopeful in the fall that we are transporting special ed kids to school. And like I said earlier, that model may look a little different than the other models. But, Pam has been through this when she worked in the district as an employee, significant layoffs. I know Mike experienced at working at his level in education at the state as well. I think it's very likely that even come this fall, there will be potential layoffs once we find out what it looks like. And if folks aren't working, we can't continue to keep them on the payroll.
Okay, and then there's a rumor going on that I heard that if you would usually, because of the difference in ESY and the structure of it, if in the past you were an employee of ESY and this year cannot get that job because of the different model, that you will be able to collect unemployment. Is that something that the district will approve all that? Is that fact or fiction, or I guess it doesn't matter. I guess I understand what you're saying. We need to keep employees. I admire that. But then I look at the budget shortfall and think about how much money's gone out. Return on investment.
Yeah, no, I hear you. I don't know that we're the ones that approve the unemployment. I think that's, if people file for unemployment, it's not up to us in all situations. Trent, can you add anything to that?
I don't know the specifics of that situation. It really depends on whether there's a position waiting for them at some point in the future, whether they would qualify and how big that gap is. I know for some of our summer workers, they do end up qualifying for unemployment because of the length of gap is long enough that they can get unemployment during the summers.
Okay.
But it's very situational dependent. So it would really just vary. And I don't know the answer specific to those folks specifically.
And I wasn't thinking, I admit, about keeping the bus drivers because we know we're so short-staffed in transportation to begin with.
Yeah, so we're really trying to look position by position.
The light bulb didn't go on, okay?
No, that's okay. Hey, you know what? We asked the same question. This is why I think it's really beneficial. One of the things, and I'll share this with you. When we go to make cuts, we want to make wise decisions. We want to look at where we can. Here's a perfect example. We've added a lot of supports for social emotional needs of students. Those needs are greater, and they're going to be greater than when we come back than ever before. If we were to cut those, the downside of that and the harm that we could impact on the students is something that I don't even want to consider. So we want to be thoughtful. Often people will say like, oh, you got too many administrators, cut administrators. We got some data last year. Out of the districts in the region, Natomas, Elk Grove, Folsom Cordova, Sac City, Twin Rivers, we have the lowest percentage of administrators in this county of all of those. And it's clear. But that's the kind of data we need to show people, because it's like, oh, we'll just cut more administrators. And I'll tell you, we're going to, not at the school level. Let me dismiss this, my next meeting popping up. But we are going to just, we will, where we can trim, we will trim. And so, but we'll have more conversations. And when we get to the fall, I want to be able to share with this group some more specific data and really get your feedback, because there are positions and that we are going to have to lay off. We did offer an early retirement incentive last year, and we chose not to implement it because it came about right as all of this chaos was happening. But that's a tool that many districts use to avoid significant layoffs, and it's something that I'll probably be taking back to the board earlier this year in the fall to consider. Okay. Because that could help the district really even reorg. I know, like Melissa in her department over there, we have, well, I'll share two examples. We have an administrative assistant for an assistant superintendent who's retiring. We're not going to fill that position at this point in time. We have a director that just took a job with another organization. We're not going to fill those positions. So we're going to capture all that, and then when we go into 21-22, we'll completely reorganize. But that director position that's leaving, I don't plan to fill that at all going forward. We're going to figure out how to do things more efficiently. Trent, he has one of his staff members that left. We're not filling that position. So the communications department is not going to have as many folks. So one of the challenges when we go through budget cuts is people are used to a certain level of response and support or communication. It's going to take a step back. All right, any other questions on that budget?
Thank you.
Trent, looks like we have two more raised hands.
Actually, Wendy just went, so it looks like Violet is up next. Violet, you should have your microphone open.
It just seemed like a good time to echo back to earlier in the conversation when you were saying, Superintendent Kern, about needing to restructure for even the year after next year, that those gaps are still going to be there and growing. And so while there's going to be cuts in some areas, that seems like an area that we will have to actually potentially grow in providing more support for students who really need it through intervention. So I just wanted to put that out there as an echo back to earlier in the conversation. And I know everyone's had an individual experience. I just want to say as a parent, and I know I can't speak to Wendy's experience, that the teachers that our sons have been working with are working overtime. They are working 2 jobs. They are trying 3 jobs, just in trying to learn something new, even after decades of experience. So while, you know, maybe emails didn't go answered and things like that, it wasn't for lack of commitment. It was just having too many spinning plates in the air, and some things were bound to drop. So I just wanted to put that out there as another parent perspective.
I appreciate that. All right, I want to touch on one more item, and then I'm going to just open it up for any general comments. And if we can try and keep them somewhat short, because I have kept you guys now almost 2 hours. But again, I think I've appreciated this. I'm enjoying this, and I think the board appreciates it as well. With all that is going on in our community and all the challenges and the situation with George Floyd, I want to read a statement that I released earlier this week. And the reason I want to read it is because the last part of it talks about the impact. I put out the following statement on Monday. We stand with our students, staff, families, and community in grieving the death of George Floyd. In one tragic and preventable act, the world was brutally exposed to racism and inequity endured by many Black Americans daily and ingrained into institutions throughout our country. It is important that we acknowledge how this event has impacted our youth and community, the pain it has caused, and why so many are rightfully demanding change. It is our hope that real change will result, and is brought about through peaceful demonstrations, civic participation, and engagement. If that is to occur, we each have a role to play in standing up to acts of injustice, both big and small, and engaging in the hard conversations to build greater understanding and acceptance. Our staff will be holding listening, and this is the part I wanted you all to hear as well. Our staff will be holding listening sessions with our students and staff to help share how recent events have impacted them and how we as a system can support change in our schools, our community, and our world. And Trent, can you share a little bit, that because I believe we'll have some more information about that opportunity with the listening service here soon.
Yeah, the listening sessions, we've actually had 2 planning meetings already with community partners as well as a group of staff to look at what those will look like. The early plan is to kind of have 3 sessions that are really focused on just listening about feeling the impact, what people are feeling right now, how that's impacting them as individuals, and then having 3 sessions about what does that mean for the education system? What does that mean for us specifically in San Juan? And then a final kind of session on how do we bring all those pieces together into steps for action and moving forward to how do we influence change both internal to San Juan, and in what ways do we influence positive change outside of San Juan that's appropriate for us to be influencing as well. So that's kind of the scope we're looking at. And again, we had our second organizing session. They met today at noon. So I have a meeting right after this to get kind of an update. We hope to have information with the schedule for all of those out hopefully tomorrow or Friday.
So if you know anybody in the community or students and you see that impact, and I would encourage you to have them, participate in that because it's important. The board and myself and my team value student voice. I started a Superintendent Students Advisory Council a couple of years ago, amazing group of kids. I started meeting, I think it's about 2 years ago, of a group called the Men of Equity. It's a group of African-American men and men of color that I meet with once a month. In fact, I'm meeting with them again next Tuesday, where I can really just hear some of the challenges that they're facing. Our district historically has a reputation of not being open and friendly, a district that is diverse in terms of our workforce. And that's one of the things that we really are working on. And by me having the opportunity to meet with my men of equity, I have learned a tremendous amount, and it has helped me grow personally. I think it's one of the things that I've actually called out to the board as one of my greatest joys in my job, is just learning from those men and having an opportunity to hear their voice. And so we want to be able to grow as a district. We want to be able to grow as a community. We want to be able to support our whole community. And so, you know, if you are aware of folks that would like to participate, please just make sure they have that information as well. So Trent, thanks for sharing that. And at this time, let's just open it up, and I'll give it, Trent, what time is your next meeting?
I'm good until about 3:15.
Okay, so we got until about 3:15. So we got 20 minutes. So if you would like to ask a general question again, raise your hand and we'll see what we can do in answering that, either directly now, or we can respond to the whole group after the fact in an email. You got a couple hands up already, Trent, so I'll let you start jumping in. And you're on mute again.
But Jennifer is not, so go ahead, Jennifer.
Thank you, Trent. I appreciate your help. Real quick question. In returning to school with whichever model we shall be returning with, how is the district going to allow help on the campus in terms of volunteers and others?
Very, very carefully. It's probably something that will be much more limited than it has been in the past. And as that is one of the recommendations, would be to limit folks. So that's another thing that we're having conversations about, and we'll probably have some real guidelines. But I do believe that you will see less opportunities in the fall, because I think there's going to be a lot of community members are even concerned about people coming and going as well. But that's something that by the time we get to the fall and the start of the year, we will have guidelines around that specifically, Jennifer.
Perfect. Just a couple more questions regarding the hybrid model and attendance 2 days and distance 3 days. Would the 2 days be consecutive days, or would they be interspersed throughout the week? And then what happens with the early dismissal day on Thursday?
Okay, great questions. We have considered all of the above, and like I had this conversation with my student group as well. We talked about a Monday, Wednesday, Tuesday, Thursday. One of the big challenges is we're really talking about doing deep cleaning. And so in order to do the deep cleaning that we need to do, it would be easier to have students go Monday, Tuesday, probably Wednesday, Thursday. We would be providing, and there may be questions, well, what about those students that get free and reduced lunch or we provide meals for? If you went Monday, Tuesday, when you leave Tuesday, we would provide you with 3 days worth of meals. Wednesday, Thursday, we'd provide you with 3 days of meals. Now the Thursday piece would be a regular day, and that we wouldn't have that shortened day on that. So those 4 days would have the same schedule, and that shortened Thursday would actually be Friday, or whatever day of the week it ends up becoming.
Perfect. And then lastly, regarding illness, if a child were to become ill, and there were, there's many sicknesses that can also resemble and mimic COVID-19. Would a sibling also be requested to stay home until a determination or a diagnosis was made? And then kind of dovetailing on that, will there be some kind of attendance grace this year as far as missed days go if there's multiple days out of school?
So your first part of that question is a great one. I won't try and answer it because I don't have an answer on this time about the sibling piece. That's not something that I had thought about at this point in time. Others may have batted it around. The attendance piece, yeah, I think there's going to have to be a lot of grace. I think even we're funded based on what's called average daily attendance, or ADA. So we're going to ask, and we're really pushing for a waiver from the state, because they're going to have to give us a waiver in terms of how we normally do our attendance. And as well as terms of like chronic absenteeism, all of those factors, a lot of that stuff just kind of goes out the window when you have a situation like this.
All right, I appreciate your feedback. Thank you.
Yep, thanks for the questions.
Thank you, Jennifer. And we'll be going to Susan next.
Thank you. And I wanted to say thank you also for allowing for this forum today. I really appreciated the opportunity here at the end of the year. I know there's a lot going on. You're trying to accommodate graduations and there's a lot happening. So I really appreciated the time of you and the staff and the board members for listening. It really means a lot to have this time. So thank you very much. I wanted to backtrack a little bit and just ask for a little bit of insight with regard to the third quarter grades. There was a pivot when we closed everything down. There was 1 week left in the third quarter, and the decision was made to go to credit, no credit. And I was wondering if you could shed a little light on why that occurred instead of just making a hard stop and using grades that were at that point, instead of basically negating all of, not negating, but going, here's the question. Why credit, no credit instead of taking grades at that point and doing letter grades?
Are you saying for like taking that grade and making that grade for the rest of the year?
No, for the third, just the third quarter.
You know what, let me get, that conversation we had was so long ago that to be honest with you, I cannot remember exactly why. So I will get you a response, and I'll work with Rick Messer exactly why that decision was made.
Okay, thank you.
You know, the grading is something that we brought this up today with the Teachers Association, is when we get to the fall, if you're not aware, if you don't have high school students or you don't pay attention to that level yet, the UCs and the state systems are saying they're no longer going to require the SAT, which was a huge part.
Right.
So my feeling is grades are even going to become a bigger piece of this. And so when we get, and we got a lot of pushback. The Teachers Association got pushback, the board got pushback that when we went credit, no credit, and then we allowed for grades. Got a lot of nasty emails. Got a lot of people that were appreciative as well. But we're working through that whole grading piece when we get to fall as well, because for high school students, it's going to be more important now than ever. Yeah. And you know, let me share one other thing. We highlight often that we have a really positive working relationship with our Teachers Association. And sometimes the funny thing is we get beat up over that a little bit, that people will say, oh, you do exactly what the union wants. The funny thing is the union hears from their teachers, oh, you just do whatever the superintendents want. And when you look at the lowest percentage of raises that we've given, you know, we've tried to work together responsibly. I will share with you, we are able to do things and have conversations. Like this work that we're looking at during the summer is so far ahead of what some of these other districts are even thinking about, because they don't have that partnership relationship.
Yeah.
And so there's pros and cons to all relationships, but then I know the board sees the tremendous benefit of being able to work together. I say this all the time. If you're constantly fighting with somebody, it's harder to progress. But when we're working together, we're able to do things for our students. And so I'm proud of that working relationship. And I also know that that positive working relationship is going to help us get through this budgetary crisis together as well.
Yep.
All right. Thanks, Susan.
Thank you, Susan. And next is Shannon. Shannon, you should have your microphone open.
Yep. I just had two quick questions. When you were talking about the hybrid model and going Monday, Tuesday, and then like Wednesday, Thursday, or, you know, whatever days it is that an all day, like 8 to 3 normal day, or is it like a half day? I know there were several presented on the hybrid model, so I just wasn't sure what kind of the district is going towards on that.
Good question. We would be going all day. You heard some conversations about like doing half day. When you start looking at that and when you start thinking about transporting students, even though we don't have home to school transportation for everybody, that creates some real challenges for folks. So we are looking at, it would be like a normal day for those 2 days a week.
And then my second question is, we go to a hybrid or traditional model depending on how things open up. If things flare up and we have to close down again, how quick are we going to go to distant learning again? I mean, because I know some school districts in different states went immediately, and I know ours did 2 weeks because we had to pass out Chromebooks. So how is that going to look? I mean, can we not have that gap again?
I think we're much better prepared to implement distance learning quicker. One of the, I think it was a superintendent from LA Unified said, going to distance learning is kind of like trying to land somebody on the moon. And we did it in this compressed period of time. And we have stubbed our toe, we've cracked our head, we've done it all during this period of time. We've done a lot of good work, but we've learned a lot. We're better prepared to go back to it next year. And again, our thinking around developing these kind of recorded lessons will allow us to pivot sooner as well. Because a lot of people think we are going to see it flare up, but you have flu season. Will that hit in the fall? What will that look like? None of us, again, have the answer to that. The biggest challenge, again, though, is going to be getting technology in the hands once we go there, because I will tell you, we probably will not have the number of devices to hand out that we did this year, because I think there's going to be pretty significant loss. We might have to do, some other districts had to go to like, okay, we're going to give one device for each student, K3, 4, 6, things like that. We may have to be a little bit more conservative in the distribution of our technology than we were this time, which I don't like that as an answer, but that is our reality.
Yeah. Okay, I think that was it. I've had one more, but I couldn't remember it, so we're good.
You can email me, Shannon, as well.
No problem.
All right, Violet, I don't know, Trent, did I lose Trent? Let me see if I can. Let me find you here, Violet, and I will.
Violet, you should be open.
Okay.
Thank you so much. I don't want to prolong the meeting, but I did forget a question that was posed last week, and I'll try to integrate it through what you've already mentioned, which is you've mentioned deep cleaning as a way to keep, any potential contamination at bay. During a school day, in the PPE budget or in the budget, is there room for hand sanitizing stations for maybe rooms that don't have sinks or that kind of thing? What might it look like other than the deep cleaning? And I know it could be a premature question, but when you're batting that idea around, what's kind of come up at this point?
So we will have a hand sanitizing unit in every single classroom in the district. That will be, we are actually buying those units. Here's crazy part. Like, we've got a couple here in the district office. Those, like 4 months ago, were $10. They're $30 now. So right there, you just go, are you serious? We are buying enough hand sanitizer to fill those for the entire year next year. So we're trying to get way out ahead of those types of situations. At the board meeting on the 23rd of this month, our facilities folks are going to provide a pretty thorough overview for the board on what all they're doing. And so I would encourage you to at least look at that board packet and see it, so that or join the board meeting as well via Zoom, so you can hear them talk about all the precautions we're going to make or do and take in order to make sure that the campuses are cleaned. Even the work we're doing this summer, but then the deep cleaning that we'll be doing. So they've done a really, really thoughtful job around this. Our facilities team is outstanding. So I've got a lot of confidence in them.
Thank you so much.
Yep.
Did you have a date for the next board meeting?
Well, that board meeting is on the 23rd, where they'll be providing that overview.
Thank you.
All right. Well, I want to say thank you to all of you. It's good to interact again with parents and community members. I think you guys would be willing to do this.
Kent, you do have one more.
Okay. But I'll take that in a second. I'm going to ask for, I think it may be beneficial for us to even try and connect before the school year starts again. So maybe we do one more of these in early August, because I think that could, by that time, it allows all of us to help share information with each other. So, and Trent, did you say we had one more hand raised?
Looks like Kelsey has a question or comment.
I was wondering about is there a chance that schedules would change? I'm thinking of like the high school level. Are they still going to get all of those classes? But it's the same thing, in the middle school or the elementary. Will they have music, those extra kind of things, or are we looking that those kinds of things will be cut?
I think some of those things, we're not looking at cutting the arts, but some of those, like that could look very differently come this fall. And we may not be offering as much of it. So, but like band, take, when I was at Carnegie, I had 50, 60 kids in my band. The teacher's like, yeah, I'll take every kid you can. And he was amazing.
Yeah.
And so that's going to look very different. And so some of those things, we're still working through what that will look like in the fall. There is an absolute possibility that, and the high school principals, when I talked to them about this on Friday, that schools are going to have to build master schedules, both middle and high schools. And when it comes to the start of the school year, they may have to redo that whole master schedule based on, like, we have about 14% of families who say they're not going to send, or they don't want to send their kids back at all in the fall. Okay, for us, that's 6,000 kids. If you're at a school, a little more, less than that. But if you're at a school with 1,000 kids, now all of a sudden, you've got 140 less kids. Well, you're building a master schedule for 1,000, you have that much less. You've got to adjust what that master schedule is going to look like. And that's where I said you might even have to shift staff and teachers to other sites where it's needed more.
So will, like the high school, some of the classes where there is only one period of an AP physics class, is there a possibility that those kinds of classes will get cut from the schedule because they're only the one?
We're not reducing instructional staffing for next year. Now, we're putting a freeze even on hiring teachers, because if we have, at this point in time, if you've got vacancies at your school site and you have far fewer kids show up, you may not need that many teachers. And again, if we ended up not hiring, 20 teachers, we've significantly lowered our operating cost in terms of staffing. But I would say the master schedules at high schools, you're still going to have probably the same number of kids that want to take those AP classes. So those should still be there in the fall.
Okay. Thank you. I appreciate it. I appreciate this whole opportunity to meet together.
Yep. And one more, Trent, are you still here, or did he? Oh, yep, he's still here.
I am still here, and we've actually got two more that have popped up. We are closing in on that 3:15 hard stop that Kent and I have, so these are probably going to be our last two. Our next one is going to be Jennifer. And Jennifer, your mic should be open for you.
I appreciate it. Just circling back to the question about the district's preparedness to pivot to distance learning, and the ability to offer technology support. If presuming we start the year in a hybrid model, will we not start the year with technology available for students?
We will, but here's the challenge. We need a certain number of devices at the school site as well, because even there's what's called compliance, and a number at our middle schools, we have certain adoptions that are technology based. So those devices have to be at the school sites. So what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to identify how many devices we have in total, how many devices we have to have at school, and then we'll base that on how many devices do we have available to hand out, and then how many families, we'll look at, so like how many families did we distribute to? I'll share with you, this has been challenging. We had at one site, a family take 5 computers, all 5 of those have been destroyed already, and we've given them another 5, okay? So we're thinking we're gonna lose at least 25 to 30% of the Chromebooks that we distributed, we will not get back. So we're talking 5, 6, 7,000. So it's likely we will not have as many to hand out in the fall as we did. I have had parents tell me already, you know, we got, you know, 3 devices, we could make do in the fall with 2, or you know what, I didn't think my kids needed this. I'm gonna go out and get them their own, you know, now. So we're gonna have to deal with that as we get through that, but that's gonna be a real challenge. And I wanna get to this last question before Trent has to leave and I have to leave. So April is up, Trent.
And April, you should be able to unmute.
Thank you. Yes, I'll make it real quick. I just had a question. You can hear me, right?
Yes.
Okay, I just wanted to see if there will be a district-wide announcement letting parents know they can return tech to any site, because I've only received notification for the site that I work at, but not the site that my son goes to. And I don't know what we're doing about returning tech at this point.
Trent, do you have more on that?
The tech return right now is primarily organized to return to your student's school. So it's not how we had done the distribution where you could go to necessarily any school. That's not to say you couldn't technically return it. Let me check with technology services and our schools divisions and make sure we have process worked out, and we can send some clarifying information out.
Okay, that's great.
April, what I would say to you too is I would say it's inconvenient if a parent has students at multiple schools to expect them to go to all those schools and return it. Much like we were able to distribute at one site, I think they will, and we'll figure out how we can return at a particular site.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking would be easier for our families, especially when transportation is the issue to begin with.
I appreciate you bringing that up, and that's a great way to finish out our conversation today. And that's the kind of things that we're not always thinking about. That's very helpful. So again, I just want to thank everybody for your time. And I will have Nan send something out here in the near future about getting together in August at some point. So thank you guys.